All the times I've driven a vehicle in my life can be broken into two categories. Category 1, roughly 40,000 drives. Category 2, roughly 10 drives. Category 1, 40,000 drives, represents all the times I have driven since I first set foot in a vehicle in driver's ed in high school. It includes my entire high school transportation career, all the trips I may have taken in college, all the trips I may have taken as a young professional, doing whatever I was doing as a young professional. It includes recreation. It includes the stint that I even had with Uber, involving thousands of rides and in some pretty crazy situations in unfamiliar territories. And yet for all of those 40,000 rides, the number of speeding tickets I received in category 1 is 0. 0 for 40,000. Category 2, Southern Illinois. Roughly 10 trips through Southern Illinois. I have a 1 in 5 chance of getting a speeding ticket in Southern Illinois. The second ticket of which I've received was yesterday afternoon for doing 10 over in a 70, along with everybody else. Whatever. I was going faster than the speed limit, so I got a ticket. That's not an issue to me. The first time I got a ticket in Illinois was a perfect storm, which I'll tell you about in a little bit perhaps. But I'm staying out of Southern Illinois when it comes to driving. Maybe I'll go through some other way next time. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. We probably don't need to see this part. Texas after the mega snowstorm of 2021. 30 feet of snow turned the Lone Star State into a tundra. We just got back yesterday and not a flake of snow to be seen here. I'm not exactly sure how much they got. Maybe 18 inches if that, but it was in the upper 60s when we arrived yesterday. So, Daisy. Somewhat ironically, maintenance is picking up garbage with a bucket. I think the irony of that will become a little more clear as we head closer to the dog park. See all the trash that hasn't been picked up and in the aftermath of the snowstorm. TCU volleyball poster or basketball, looks like. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing all right.
Come on, buddy.
More trash. All right, there you go. All right, let me unclip you. Hold on. Hard to do this with one hand. There we go. Thrown out box for the classic game Operation. Little pair of electric tweezers sticking out on the side there, if you can see that. So, this is the dog park on the corner of our apartment property here, where the dog likes to come sniff around, basically. Sometimes we get a little action in here, but for the most part, it's all about the scents that other dogs have left behind. It's a beautiful spring morning. Still about a month out from spring. There we go. And we are rolling. Heading out of the Berkeley apartment complex, where I've lived for the past few years during most of my time here in Fort Worth, Texas. Took a grocery cart from nearby Fiesta Mart. In our complex, for some strange reason, it's a luxury gated apartment complex. Sometimes the gate is questionable. These should all be closed back here, but they're not. It's funny, Jamie said yesterday, we get to move from a gated unsafe apartment community to a non-gated safe neighborhood when we get back to Greentown, Indiana. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to the Goodwill that's nearby me to pick up a mouse so that Jamie can do the work that she needs to do. She's a remote worker, and we brought everything that she needs, multiple monitors, laptop, all that other stuff, but apparently we didn't bring the mouse. So we're gonna go get a mouse. Turning on to 8th Avenue. And about to pass on the right-hand side a Sherwin-Williams that used to be a Golden Chick restaurant. All right, what do we got up here? We got some type of blockage in the road, or busting of pipes, I'm assuming, from the freezing weather. It's my first time back in Fort Worth since that cold spell hit a few days ago. So I'm not quite sure what to expect. Head all the way down here to Berry Avenue, which is what the Goodwill is on anyway. Yeah, it's kind of weird that the one monumental weather event that has taken place here in Texas in the last 30 years, you know, aside from perhaps hurricanes or something, I missed because I just happened to be out of town. It's kind of like when I was away from my apartment the night that Johnny Manziel, the football player, was being searched for in my apartment complex by the police. Helicopters overhead, the whole deal. And I missed it. You know, of course, I head out to my balcony every time there's just a helicopter from a local hospital flying over, which is usually a couple times a night. I just love watching stuff from the balcony. All right, check out Goodwill here. I'm sure we can find a mouse, I hope. Some of the stores are better when it comes to electronics. I believe it open at 9. I see a sign on the door. Let's see if I can see what it says. It says donation hours. So I'm just going to assume that we're still a go. And that it opened 4 minutes ago. Highlight. Okay. Hello, Jamie Huntsman.
You today?
What's that?
I said, hi, Raul Mosley. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. I just hit record on my next video thing. So what's going on?
Real quick, I just wanted to say, hey, if you happen to come across any artificial plants that are priced decently at Goodwill, if you would think to grab those, if you think to look.
I will look for that. I went to the first Goodwill. They did not have any computer mices, so I'm on to the next place. I think I'm going to go to Camp Bowie and just hit that little triangle, then come back, but I won't be too long. So.
Okay, no worries at all. I love you.
I love you too. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay. So lucked out at this Goodwill, kind of, except for the fact that I didn't pick up the one thing that I was going to pick up, which is a computer mouse for Jamie. But I did find 2 pair of Alan Edmonds shoes. So that is the holy grail of my search usually, unless I find a pair of Alden, which I've only found one, and actually sold that one for $284. Paid $9 for it. But they were Shell Cordovan shoes. So very high in demand. But these were, let's see, it was both loafers, a pair of Alan Edmonds black Codys, and a pair of Alan Edmonds brown German, spelled with a J, loafers. Loafers are a little more difficult to sell in the sense that when I have purchased them online, I'm never really sure if it's going to fit, because even if you have a 9.5 on one shoe, it doesn't necessarily mean that 9.5 is going to fit with the same brand with another model of that shoe. But nonetheless, I paid about $10 for each of those, and I'll probably sell them for north of 20. Is my hope, at least. They're not in great enough condition where I'm going to sell them for 100 or close to 100. So it'll be $30, $40 range, most likely. And by the time I take my Pure Polish and Saphir shoe products to them, they'll look pretty good. And then I also got a pair of rubber coverings for dress shoes, which you don't really need around here much, but up in Indiana that will become quite helpful. So what I'm doing now is I'm heading to the Goodwill on Camp Bowie. So I sell shoes on eBay. Started doing that about a month ago, last March, and learned the whole ins and outs of setting up an eBay store and how to purchase shoes, how to refinish them, how to list them, photograph them, store them, pack them, sell them, that whole thing. So going right now through the campus of Texas Christian University, or as I like to call it, Texas quotation mark Christian quotation mark closed University, here on University Drive. I've seen some interesting historical photographs of this place in the early 1900s, and there's like nothing else anywhere around it. It's just desolate wasteland, undeveloped Texas landscape back then. But these same buildings that I'm driving by to the side of me, which you can't see very well, were still there. So as far as Texas history goes, which to me in my mind is fairly recent, it's on the older side of what's talked about in these parts. So I'm south of downtown Fort Worth, heading up to I-30, and then I'll head west from there out to Camp Bowie, where there used to actually be a military camp there during World War I. which was one of the major reasons why Hell's Half Acre here in Fort Worth, which featured some of the most active brothel sites in the country, got shut down. Because technically the base, the camp, was within 5 miles of Hell's Half Acre, and the federal government said, can't have those types of people, prostitutes and the like, close to a camp of active military men training to go into war. So it got shut down, and much of that operation moved up to Jacksboro Highway, to the northwest part of town. And a lot of that eventually got shut down when there was a car bombing that took place, I think, in the 50s, right here on this road up ahead a few miles on University. So anyway, Fort Worth isn't quite as rough and tumble as it used to be back in the day. Heard a fascinating story about the brothels of Hell's Half Acre at, I think it was the Central Library here downtown Fort Worth. They had a lecture series, and a graduate student, I believe at TCU, had written her thesis on some of the leading women who were running the brothels using fairly advanced business strategies. And it was interesting to see how interconnected they were to the powers that be, which of course explains so much about how they were able to survive for so long. So about to pass up a legendary eatery here in Fort Worth, the Old South Pancake House, a frequent haunt of famed pianist Van Cliburn, who used to go there and had his booth that he would frequent at 3 o'clock in the morning quite often. So there's actually a plaque on that booth where Van Cliburn used to go. If you've never heard of him, just check him out sometime on Wikipedia. He did a lot to thaw relations between the United States and the Soviet Union back in the 60s. Went over to the Soviet Union and put on some concerts, and I think the people over there were just amazed that Americans could have any level of civility. So he helped build some diplomatic bridges between the two countries, at least at an informal level. Merging onto I-30, heading west. It's about 9:30 in the morning on Friday here, so past rush hour. But things never get past being completely crazy around here unless you drive at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Which I have on many occasions. Up on the left-hand side is Arlington Heights High School. Probably see a spire sticking up if you can see it well enough on your, whatever you're watching this on. It's a high school where Bill Paxton of Titanic and Twister fame attended. It's the high school where John Denver attended when he lived here in Fort Worth. And it's the high school where Lee Harvey Oswald, the shooter of JFK, also went. We passed earlier on Pascal High School, where Ginger Rogers, the dancer, attended. Also where that Nexium guy, if you've heard of him, a guy who was a cult leader, who etched his initials in the skin of women. He was just recently arrested like 4 or 5 years ago, if that. Anyway, he attended that same high school for a little bit. So we are going to take Camp Bowie contrast to the Goodwill that has been one of my best spots to pick up high quality men's shoes. That's where I got the pair of Alden shoes from years ago. Well, 2 years ago maybe. No? Like a year ago. Yeah, I've only been doing this since March. Seems like it's been forever, but it's only been 11 months. All right, get over here on this side. And going the other direction, much of the road is bricks that were original bricks to what this place used to look like back when it was a large military base. And I read somewhere that the fundamentalist R.A. Torrey, known for contributing to the book, I believe, The Fundamentals, back in the 1920s, was stationed out here at Camp Bowie as a chaplain. The sign up on the left for Queen Nefertari's Egypt, not to be confused with Nefertiti. So I do want to go see that display before it or I roll out of town. Apparently her knee is there. I mean, hey, what are you gonna say? Go see an Egyptian pharaohess's knee in Fort Worth, Texas. Who would have thought? Come up with a list of a million random things that would not have been on the list. At least not on my list. So about my first ticket going through Southern Illinois, that was a perfect storm. And there were so many reasons that was like, okay, yes, I deserved the ticket. I was going 15 over at a 55, or 14. I was going 69 at a 55. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, had just turned to head toward the highway and missed the highway. So I'm in a rental car. I'm not familiar with the car. I don't really have a feel for how fast it's going. What I know is that I'm in the dark. I missed the highway. I'm looking at my GPS at the same time that I start to descend down probably what's the steepest hill in the entire state of Illinois. And just as I hit 69, here comes a police cruiser the other way, and he got me. Now, what was interesting about that transaction is that the guy tried to get me to pay with cash right there, which I thought was quite unusual, but, you know, I'm in the dark at 4 in the morning, out in the middle of nowhere on this hill in southern Indiana, and it's not exactly the place to call a trooper on whether I can pay cash or not, and whether that's, you know, legal, etc. But anyway, that was my first experience ever getting a ticket. And I'm a really good driver, except for when I happen to be making videos as I'm driving down the road. Apparently there's that. But just because I haven't gotten a ticket outside of those 2 occasions doesn't mean that I haven't deserved one. I mean, pretty much every time you go out and drive, you exceed the speed limit by at least a mile an hour. I don't intentionally speed. I usually do go the speed limit or just a bit over. You know, city driving is different from highway driving. And in order to be safe, you do sometimes have to go over the speed limit, sometimes quite a bit over the speed limit, or else you're causing a problem with the flow of traffic. The Goodwill is over on the left. I'm about to make a left-hand turn into there. It's not a large shoe section, but it's bigger than the one that I was just at. I'll show you a picture of that one right now, taken from the very corner of the back of the store. This one's got a couple shelves, a couple rows, but it's not in an affluent neighborhood, but it's near neighborhoods of affluence, so it gets some good shoes here. Back in a bit. All right, leaving that Goodwill after no luck there whatsoever. I don't know if you can hear it. There's a fighter jet flying over the nearby Naval Air Base Carswell here in the west side of Fort Worth, where they make the F-35 fighter jet. In the past have made the F-16, and I believe during World War II the B-24. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to head down to another Goodwill here in Fort Worth, on the southwest part of town. Technically, it's Benbrook, which I learned recently was a frequent place for FDR to visit when he was president, because his son lived here in Benbrook, married a Fort Worth girl. That marriage didn't last, but FDR and Eleanor would come out here to Benbrook and spend quite a bit of time. Would take the train into town, arriving at the T&P train station. So that's Benbrook that you see off there on the top of the hill on the horizon. I guess his son had a ranch out there. And that would have been interesting to figure out where that was, see what it has developed into all these years later. Fort Worth is an interesting city. It's a large city in terms of its overall population, given the way the city limits are defined. But it's a small city in terms of its downtown, its footprint, the number of skyscrapers that it has. It's, looks like something where you would expect a town to be 40th or 50th in the country in terms of size, but it's about the 12th or 13th largest city in overall population. It's also a small town in terms of having the feel of small town connections, and that can be a positive, or you could say small town politics, which should be a little less positive. So it's a little bit of Sinclair Lewis's Main Street reflected in the local politics here in Fort Worth. It's a book I happen to be reading now. I'm probably 3/4 of the way through it. I'm finding that Sinclair Lewis is emerging as one of my favorite authors. Recently read Elmer Gantry, working through Babbitt, about halfway through that one, and then going through Main Street right now. It's got a really good sense of sociology, and maybe psychology as well, but more sociology. So after visiting this Goodwill, I'm going to jump on the ring that goes around the west part of town and go to one more, which will be near the Air Force Base, the Air Reserve Base. Hopefully find a mouse at one of these two. If I can't find one at the second one, then I'll stop. I guess I won't stop at the Best Buy because that one has been closed. I'll stop at Staples, which is close by, and get something. I wouldn't normally show this much footage of driving, but this is a regular route for me over the last year since I've been shoe shopping. But it's one that I might not make this trip that many more times. So I'm kind of recording this for my own memory. So now we are in Benbrook, and we are going to make a right-hand turn, which comes up quickly. And I'm going to miss that turn because I got a car on my bumper and take this one instead. This is one of those Goodwills that has not been very successful for me in terms of my shoe hunt. And I don't know why that would be. There just aren't that many good shoes here. And it's not that they're lousy shoes. There are some Goodwills where the shoes are, you know, look like they're 30 years old and have really seen abuse. Dusty, soles worn out. And that's not what this is, but you know, there tend to be more Stacey Adams and whatever. Stuff people would never search online to buy. All right, let's see what we got in here. All right, no such luck there. A lot of Johnson & Murphy shoes, which are, some of them can be decent if you get the higher quality ones from years ago that have been well maintained, well conditioned. But there's not a big demand online for Johnson & Murphy shoes, or let's put it this way, there's a tremendous supply of Johnson & Murphy shoes. So, you know, if you find a nice pair of black cap-toe dress shoes that you're excited about selling, you can look online and, see, I go out this other way. You can look online and find that shoe is probably available for $9 plus free shipping by somebody out there. So you got to get undercut by the supply. So I generally pass up on them, unless they're my size and they happen to be something a little on the special side, which is hardly ever, but nonetheless. What was interesting about that visit is that I was the only customer at one point inside the store, and I was only in there for 5 minutes, if that. That's never happened at that store. And the other one that I went to, maybe there was one or two other people in there. That has never happened. So it's interesting to me that even after COVID, you know, the first days when they reopened the Goodwill stores here and people were skittish about going out in public, and even then, there were a number of people, 10, 15 people. But actually, the first store that I went to on Berry Street, that one was fairly empty. The second store that I went to, there were a few people in there. So we go to store number 4. And that's the one that's in White Settlement. I've looked up the history of that name. I don't remember all the details about it, but what is interesting, let's see, I'm going to go west, let's go this way. What is interesting is that there is a fairly large population of Irish immigrants who live there, who came to Fort Worth around the 1840s, 1850s, when the potato famine hit Ireland. And by and large, they have not integrated with the rest of the Fort Worth population. So they tend to live in trailer park enclaves, but they drive very high-end cars. You know, it's not uncommon to see 3 Mercedes S-Class coupes all lined up, one trailer, next trailer after that. But still, they live in trailer homes there. Anyway, you can do some research on that if you're interested in that. There are, I think, 4 or 5 surnames among the entire population. Very closed group, very difficult to get inside if you're an outsider. But that is in the White Settlement area where we're headed. I-20, kind of this ring that goes around the city. Past I-30, which pretty much ends just a few miles west of here, merges into I-20, and then 20 continues out westward. Coming up on the section of car dealerships, motorcycle dealerships that are to the west of town here. Beautiful sunshiny day. One nice thing about living here in Fort Worth is that if it does get cold, you know it's usually going to be 70 degrees within the 5-day forecast that's coming up, or at least in the 60s. It's hardly ever as cold as it was for as long as it was. I mean, it got down to 0 here, below 0, I think. Of course, it was that cold in Indiana when we were there, but Indiana's got the infrastructure and power grids, and they're weatherized to be able to handle that type of situation. So I could take 30 east to Cherry Lane and take Cherry, or maybe it's Cherry Avenue, whatever it is, take Cherry north to get to where we're going. But instead, I'm just going to go down to White Settlement here. Take that to close to Cherry. I should be analyzing my driving since I mentioned about the ticket thing. Apartments over to the left, if you can see them. I thought about moving in there when I first moved to Fort Worth, but I wanted to be up on the 3rd floor, and I wanted to have a view of downtown Fort Worth. And once I got up there in the model apartment and looked towards downtown was about 1/8 of an inch tall. Just it was too far away. So, plus the reviews were bad of the place. And as it turns out, the reviews are bad of every single apartment complex here in the Fort Worth area, with the exception of 2. At least the last time I checked several years ago. Turning onto White Settlement Road. I will say this, Fort Worth has just got horrible roads. It's like slabs of concrete that don't quite align. I don't notice them as much when I'm driving a decent car. The one that I'm in now is a light car. What I had before was the same thing, so I feel every thought of a pebble, every hint of a wrinkle. I can feel it all the way through the core of my being. So the Air Reserve Base is, as picture looking out the front window here is at about 10 o'clock on the clock, with 12 being straight ahead. I pop over there and see if there's any action going on. Since we're so close, it's a whole community called DFW Spotters on Facebook. And there's some good viewing areas to camp out, take pictures, roll video. I think the speed limit here is 35. It might be 30. I was going about 34, 33 back there. Just saw the police officer at the intersection back there. It's like, I technically could have gotten a ticket if the speed limit is only 30. I can see someday them moving to a system where they fine you, basically give you small little tickets. Every time you go 5 over or whatever, it's 10 cents. And I bet they could just make a killing on that. Or, think about it this way, it could provide a much more ever-present deterrent to speeding. I know I'd be much more conscious of it. I don't know how they would do that technology, but the way things are becoming so integrated these days, that's really not that far of a stretch. Goodwill is coming up here to the left past this light. All the Goodwills I've been to, this is the one where I've seen people arrested for shoplifting. Twice, at least. So, be back in a bit. Hopefully find a mouse, artificial plants, which are ridiculously expensive at full retail, and maybe some shoes. All right, no such luck at the White Settlement Goodwill on Cherry Lane. For mice, for shoes, for artificial plants. So we need to go to the Staples. That's somewhere around here. Unless, I think I do have a couple other options. Nah, let's roll and hit a couple of the Goodwills or thrift stores. Gonna take us down to Haltom Thrift, and then maybe to McCart Thrift Store, which is a fairly large one. They charge a little bit more for the shoes at times. Goodwill here in Fort Worth charges $7.99 for shoes, generally speaking, which becomes $8.65, which I then round up to $9, contributing a little bit towards their Goodwill charities. So about $9 a shoe. Over in Dallas, it's $5.99, so it's $2 less. But at the McCart thrift store, a good pair of shoes, somewhere around $20, $24. That being said, I have purchased Allen Edmonds, quality Allen Edmonds shoes for $9 there, or less. Somebody who's labeling them just doesn't know the value of what an Allen Edmonds shoe can resell for. Not taking the time to go look at the air base right now. Really want to get that mouse to Jamie a little bit sooner than later. When I used to Uber here in Fort Worth, I would occasionally camp out across the street up ahead from that Holiday Inn Express on days in which I knew there were big games in Arlington, like a national championship game, that type of stuff, thinking that there are probably somebody staying out there who would need a ride to AT&T Stadium, and you can pick them up here in Fort Worth pretty easily on those days. But I wanted to get further out to make the ride a bit longer, make more money. That placement didn't really ever work. I don't know that I ever picked up anybody from that hotel, the Holiday Inn Express to the right, straight ahead. But there's another one that's completely straight ahead behind those traffic lights up there above. Never picked one up from there either. Go figure. And it could be that people who were this far out had their own car and just planned to drive into the stadium, even though it's only a few miles further to the west than what the other hotels are downtown. So we're going to get back on 30, head west, or head east. Confident that a couple of these thrift stores will have a computer mouse. I see them all the time, at least I think I do, but I haven't seen the cables. I've seen keyboards, but not a whole lot of computer mice today. It's not really something I look for anyway. Tell you what, driving was insane last night as we passed through Dallas about 6 o'clock, heading back to Fort Worth. It was normal traffic, but there was a pack of at least 20 motorcycles that decided to drag race. And they just went in and out between the cars, going 20, 30, 40 miles an hour faster than we were. Noise, chaos. I've seen worse. I've had a gang of, I call it a gang, it may not be, just a huge group of motorcycles, 100 of them, do the same thing, including riders who will get up on the seat of their motorcycle with no hands and ride down the highway standing on the seat of the motorcycle. I wish I had gotten video of that. I mean, when you have 70 miles, 80 miles an hour of wind resistance, I would think that would push you off the motorcycle seat. I don't get that one. But some crazy stuff. And I don't mind leaving some of that stuff behind. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I can check that off my list. South. Go to Haltom Thrift. Gonna pass Central Market or go around Central Market. which is owned by H-E-B, large grocery store chain here in Texas. And that's the high school straight up ahead where I mentioned that Bill Paxton and John Denver and Lee Harvey Oswald and others went to. But up on the right-hand side is Central Market up on that hill. Really upscale grocery store. You know, you're not going to really go in and buy a bag of Ruffles or a 2-liter of Coke. They're going to have chips, they're going to have soda, but it's going to be more off-brand, upscale. Really good meat counters, large selection of cheeses, all that stuff. So they're just really expensive though. So I don't shop there a whole lot. And after I went back to Meijer, which was in Kokomo, Indiana, I was just so impressed with Meijer's selection of food. I'm not going to be missing anything by going to Meijer. And Jamie had said that. She said, you know, I really miss the grocery stores back at home compared to what Fort Worth has, which I thought was frankly absurd because there's just a lot of course, selection around here. But she was right. Once I went back to Meijer, I was like, holy cow. The amount of stuff that's here, I won't miss a beat in terms of shopping, that's for sure. And the Yankee Candle store closed down at the Markland Mall in Kokomo recently. And that's a place that Jamie likes to shop. She's big into candles. And so that was kind of sad. But we went to Meijer, and Meijer has a selection of Yankee candles that almost rivals what a Yankee Candle store would have. It was ridiculous. So we'll be in good shape as far as shopping goes. Heading over railroad tracks where a large train yard is. I believe it's the Davis train yard here in Fort Worth. And also over the Clear Fork of the Trinity River. It's no real convenient place just to go and buy a mouse here. Interesting. Liquor store? Nope. Brown bag gift shop? Nope. Hewlett is one of those arteries that cuts north and south through the west side of Fort Worth. Pretty much from I-30, it goes north of that too, but all the way down to I-20. Footage like this, I think, is more interesting down the road in terms of, you know, watching it 20, 30 years later. Because you see things that you take for granted today. You know, the way the cars looked, the number perhaps of SUVs that are on the road in 2021 compared to what might be there 30 years from now. The fact that we're driving around in gasoline-powered vehicles versus electric vehicles in the future. The lack of mass transportation which might emerge down the road, even in a place like Texas. Who knows? I can remember being a kid in Miami, 7, 8 years old, and I felt that I knew what every single one of the cars was in terms of makes and models. They were distinctive, but today's auto designs are just much more rounded. They're less distinctive, to me at least. There are probably a lot more models out today than there were 40 years ago. Coming up on one of the In-N-Outs, a hamburger restaurant here in North Texas. We're one of the few places outside of California that has In-N-Out restaurants. And they're okay to me. I've just never gotten aboard the In-N-Out hamburger wagon. Burgers are good. Fries, to me, are subpar. I don't get what they do with their fries. But never really do the shake thing either. Whataburger, of course, is the official religion of the state of Texas here. And Whataburger does have some good burgers. To me, it's just got to be a specialty burger. It's got to be a Monterey Melt. It's got to be one of the barbecue burgers they put out. But just the regular #1, not that impressed. In fact, the last one I got was cold. Cheese was like literally cold, the meat cold. I went back and got it replaced, but I don't understand how a place that can specialize in hamburgers, I mean, that's your thing, how do you ever put a subpar hamburger into the hands of the public? I just don't get that. And I know that labor is always not reliable, so that's the iffy factor there. The procedures are set up to produce an excellent product, or a good product where you can serve a hot meal, but of course the procedures aren't always followed. This is Southwest Loop 820, the overpass you see right there. In-N-Out will be on the other side of this overpass. On this side of it, there's Texas Roadhouse, which has emerged as, I think, my favorite restaurant to go to. It's a chain restaurant. It's a chain restaurant that's based in Indiana. It's actually an Indiana restaurant. I'm always struck by that irony. Going to Texas Roadhouse in Fort Worth, Texas, and ordering the Fort Worth ribeye. And it's all Hoosier. But they serve a good steak at a really decent price point, with all the other fixings that go along with it. One nice thing about living here is I did try to take advantage of mom and pop places, you know, eating at places that just weren't chains. There's a large Indian community here, so I've explored a lot of Indian grocery stores. Have purchased a number of spices from Indian grocery stores that I hope I'll be able to get up in Indiana. But here's the cool thing. It's like you've got the internet. You can order anything you want from really any place. So, part of me is not wanting to leave the Metroplex here in North Texas because of the availability of things, but in reality, I can get everything that I want to get online. So I'm in good shape. There's a chain around here called Half Price Books that's also national, but they're based here in Dallas. And we've got a few locations here in Fort Worth, including one that's going to be coming up on the left here at this next traffic light. That's probably my favorite place to go here in town. I always start off in the discount section, and I've built quite a sizable library from $2 and $3 clearance books. Most of my presidential biographies I pick up in the clearance section. It's just a matter of being patient and waiting for them to emerge at that discounted price. But again, I can find pretty much any book online, and Half Price Books does sell things online as well. The only disadvantage is not being able to go in and pick up the books physically and, look through them. But whatever. Traffic is heavy here at times. It's 10:20 now in the morning, but it's not crazy. I mean, Atlanta, technically, it has a much smaller population than Fort Worth, but driving through Atlanta, wow, that's a whole different ballgame. Driving through Chicago, of course, is larger than Fort Worth significantly, but I've never had difficulty driving here, even during rush hour. So we are getting close-ish. Crossing over Granbury, which is a road that takes me back to my apartment complex. But we're not going that direction today. I really started studying history probably 4 years ago. Picked up a $3 discount book at Half Price Books of the history of Western civilization. All stuff which I've studied in college and high school before, but for whatever reason, I just became refascinated with it all over again. And then I picked up a book by Jay Winnick called The Great Upheaval. And it was really the threefold story of the American Revolution, of Catherine the Great. I'm trying to remember what the third part was. It may have been the French Revolution. So just kind of telling the intertwining of those three stories. And that really got me fascinated with history as well. So I started a timeline, which I ended up doing in Microsoft Excel, and I add to that timeline quite a bit. I would say most days in the last couple of weeks I've been so busy doing other things that I haven't gotten to it much. But it's been fun to look at the full sweep of history and get a sense of what happened and when things happened. And one of those things that really fascinated me was that the history of Texas and North Texas, at least in terms of American history, is very recent. We're talking, Fort Worth being founded in, I think it was 1849, somewhere in that ballpark. The fort was set up downtown, but then the fort was eventually abandoned, and it was really in the 1870s, like 1873, that the city started to grow in a significant way. with the arrival of the stockyards, the coming of the railroad. But that's still recent history compared to, for example, the Midwest. You know, certainly the Northeast in the 1600s, 1700s, but then you've got the Northwest Territories, the first Northwest Territories, which would be basically Big Ten football country these days. Ohio, especially Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, that area. And so much of what really happened there was in the early 1800s. So when I go back to Indiana, I will have more history that I can play around with in terms of exploring and adding to my timeline, featuring on this series, The 1,000-Week Journey. And Texas is so big, you know, I mean, I'm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I could drive to Austin 3 hours away, drive to San Antonio 4 hours away, drive to Houston 4 hours away. And it's not really that much in between in terms of historical value. I mean, there's some, obviously. But up in the Midwest, there's, especially with the Native American history, there's just a lot to take in within driving distance. You know, here I'm in Comanche territory, and they were really situated around the panhandle of Texas, but their influence stretched down this way as well. So Quanah Parker, the last Comanche leader, would love to do a little more research on the footprint that he had here in North Texas before I leave Texas. All right, the thrift store that I'm going to go to is the Haltom thrift store. It's hit or miss. I've gotten, most of the time I get nothing there in terms of shoes. But man, one time I got a wonderful pair of black leather Fry shoes, which I have since sold on eBay. And then I got a great pair of Allen Edmondy Normandy boots. $20. Retail for at least $400. Beautiful shoes. And it was the first edition of that boot that Allen Edmonds put out when they put leather soles on it versus the rubber soles that are coming out now. So it's from what I've read on the reviews, it's the old version is the higher quality boot. Of course, if I have it resold, I'll probably put rubber soles, day-night soles on it, just for the non-slip factor, especially as I'm a photographer and carrying around expensive gear. Slipping is not in my deck of cards. And we strike out again. No computer mouse. There was some floral stuff, but I'm not sure it was significantly different from what we already have. So I'm actually not going to go to the Haltom Thrift, or not the Haltom Thrift, that's just where I was. I'm not going to go to McCart thrift store because they don't have a large electronics section, and that's priority number one at the moment. So we're going to go to the Goodwill on Alta, Mesa. If that doesn't pan out, then I will look for some type of office supply store around these parts. I was kind of hoping to pay $1 for a mouse, you know. I've seen them in just like boxes, just like mice and cables and keyboards and all that extra accessories junk. I'm just not finding them today. Okay. There really weren't any good shoes in there either. All right, so no luck at the Haltom Thrift on Alta Mesa, or at this Goodwill here on Alta Mesa as well. Just no mice, no mice. All right, what do we got here? We got us a hearse parked at a Goodwill. Just gotta have a look at that. So, I'm going to Staples. Figure out how I want to get there. And I'm going to the grocery store to pick up heavy whipping cream for Zuppa Toscana soup. That Italian Olive Garden soup. I made that last night. All I have to do is add the heavy whipping cream to it. And I got a food processor. I've been looking for a food processor. Got a really good one, well, relatively good one, at Goodwill for like 10 bucks. And ran my potatoes through it, and boy, was that great. The recipe called for potatoes sliced uniformly at about 1/6 of an inch in thickness, and was able to do that in about 20 seconds. Also ran my yellow onion through it, so that made it easy. All right, let's get up here. This four-way stop. Get up to the front of the line. Boop. All right, that car's gone. Anybody else ever talk through? I guess I'll go, since he went. Anybody else ever talk through four-way stops? I hesitated because I saw a construction guy running across the street back there, and I never really saw him out of the corner of my eye, so. All right, let's get over here. Can't imagine that a Big Lots would have a mouse. Just passed one of those. So anyway, I'm heading up to Staples on University Avenue, and not really a whole lot else to report, so I will check out for now. Bye. Well, I hadn't planned on it, but since I am going this route, I will be passing the McCart Thrift Center, so I'm going to go ahead and stop in there. And they don't have much of an electronics section, but occasionally I get lucky on high-quality men's dress shoes. It's probably the largest thrift store that we have, at least around my part of Fort Worth. And they like to organize their clothes by color, which is kind of cool to see so many blue shirts all together. And let's just go this way. Oh, I bet that place is busy. Plumbing supply store with all the broken pipes that have been taking place with the frozen weather that we've had. Be back in a second. Okay, no such luck there either. In fact, the shoes were fairly empty. Shoe section was. And sometimes that happens around here. Let's now head to probably the grocery store. Go pick up that heavy whipping cream. Followed by getting a mouse from Staples. This is McCart Avenue. We're continuing to roll northward on McCart through the south part of Fort Worth, kind of south central almost. Well, I guess south central would be more in line with I-35 running north and south. So kind of the south central west, heading north. Be passing Seminary Avenue, where the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary is located, just to the east of here, about a mile or so. My last video cut out on me, so I am making a detour. I'm going to go to another thrift store called Berry Best Buys. It's on Berry Street. And I know they do have some electronic stuff there. So we're going to give this a try. No, Berry Good Buys. And maybe I just remember seeing mice here, and so I've assumed that it's in all thrift stores. Who knows? Be back in a second. Well, didn't find any mice in there after all. They did have a large electronics collection last time I was in there, like a month ago. But they've reorganized and don't have anything like that now. They even were helpful enough to check in the back room. But I did get a really nice pair of Allen Edmonds Black Park Avenues. Size 9, good shape, look like they've been resold, but all right, I think I can go here, get in my turn lane. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay. So that was definitely a good pickup. And I might sell those upwards of 50 bucks or so. All right, so I'm gonna head over to the Kroger that's near TCU, pick up the heavy whipping cream, and then go to Staples, and then head on back. A little busy on a Monday morning at 11:29 Antimeridian. Let's pop in there, see what we got.